Chilean President Sebastián Piñera announced a state of exception and the deployment of troops to two southern regions where security forces have been repressing indigenous Mapuche communities, demanding their land rights. Indigenous peoples across Latin America mobilized this Tuesday as they mark the day of indigenous resistance to over 500 years of genocide and oppression. The UN's top court has awarded Somalia the control of most of a potentially oil and gas-rich chunk of the Indian Ocean after a bitter legal battle with neighboring Kenya over their sea border. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your host, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. Chilean President Sebastián Piñera announced a state of exception on Tuesday and the deployment of troops to two southern regions where security forces have been repressing indigenous Mapuche communities demanding land rights. The measure will initially be in force for 15 days, but it's extendable, the conservative president stated. Representatives of the Mapuche community, the largest Chilean ethnic group with more than 1.7 million among the 19 million inhabitants, are demanding the restitution of their ancestral lands, which are in the hands of forestry companies and big landowners. The lack of will of the part of the government to dialogue and provide a solution to their claims has provoked an escalation of violence in the past decade, with protesters heavily repressed by security forces. A majority of the Mapuche live in poverty and have seen their ancestral lands reduced by the expansion of the thriving timber industry, responsible for 8% of Chile's exports. And the move to deploy troops in the south comes after the violent repression of the Mapuche protesters in the capital, Santiago, over the weekend. The March for Mapuche Resistance and People's Autonomy was met with water cannons and tear gas by the Chilean police. Denis Cortés, a 43-year-old lawyer with the People's Defense Office, who was participating in the demonstrations, was killed, and the public prosecutor's office initiated an investigation in order to clarify what happened. In Colombia, a video circulated of an alleged robbery of a commercial establishment involving two people, one of them a minor. A couple of hours later, they were murdered, presumably by members of an illegal armed group operating in the department of Norte de Santander. Following the events, the police of the municipality of Tibú are under investigation for possible negligence. We have more details in the following report with our correspondent, Hernán Tovar.
These young men were seized by the community in a commercial establishment accused of alleged robbery in the municipality of Tibú, northern Santander, both of Venezuelan nationality, one of 12 and the other of 18 years of age. According to versions of the villagers, the police were notified but did not arrive, while armed men came to the place and took them away. Only a couple of hours later, the bodies of the young men were found lifeless, with bullet wounds. The national police are offering up to 100 million pesos reward for the people who deprived these foreigners of their freedom, who tied them up, and also those who beat them and drove them to the place where they were murdered, and those who perpetrated the act. The initial information indicates that they were subjects of Gaor 33, which we will bring to justice for these criminal acts. The incident was confirmed by the United Nations Office for Human Rights in Colombia and urged the authorities to investigate these events in depth and called for the life and protection of children in Colombia to be respected and guaranteed, a request that was joined by the Ombudsman's office. We will continue to accompany the community of Tibú with our teams in the territory as they have told us that they feel frightened by the circumstances surrounding this crime. We reiterate our call to the community to report to the competent authorities any action contrary to the law. For the Ombudsman's office is necessary that there is absolute clarity about the role and diligence of the national police in this tragic episode. In this region, the rates of violence have increased exponentially. So far this year, 3 massacres have been perpetrated in the department of Norte de Santander, leaving 11 people dead. It is a constant scene of territorial disputes between state forces, the ELN, the FARC dissidents, and the clan of El Golfo, in addition to confrontations of drug trafficking, profit and control of its routes. There are at least 200 municipalities, including Tibú, where the state has no control. In these 200 municipalities, as in Tibú, those in charge are illegal mafias and they exercise violence in a direct and barbaric way. And, add to that, a state that does not send message of justice and does not have effective presence in the territory, plus the pandemic and a social policy that does not reach the communities. All this exacerbates this violence and makes these irregulars feel that they have the authority to carry out these kinds of acts. At the moment, and as announced by the police commander of the department of Norte de Santander, an internal investigation was opened to assess whether there was negligence or omission of functions, and the military criminal justice system was asked to examine the case according to its competences. And a new police commander was appointed in the municipality of Tibú, where the events took place.
Thank you, Hernan, for this report, and we remain on topic. The Venezuelan Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez, condemned the murder of 2 young Venezuelans in Colombia, stressing that the government of President Iván Duque promotes xenophobia and violence against Venezuelans living in the neighboring country. On Twitter, the Vice President announced that Venezuela will activate all international mechanisms to protect its citizens residing in Colombia as victims of the policy of hatred and persecution of the Colombian authorities. She stressed that the crime committed against 2 young Venezuelans, including a minor, in the municipality of Tibú must not go unpunished. Rodriguez also reported that President Nicolás Maduro had instructed the country's foreign minister to raise the matter with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet.
Para ayudar a que los países desarrollados abandonen definitivamente.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres addressed a Security Council open debate on diversity, state building, and the search for peace this Tuesday.
While inequalities exist in every country, they are particularly rampant in countries where social services like health, education, security and justice are lacking, and where the scars of colonialism are still visible, seen in arbitrarily drawn borders and historical advantages for certain groups over others. Against this backdrop, the COVID-19 pandemic has compounded inequalities and reversed development and peace-building gains. These inequalities and weak governance structures create a vacuum that is easily filled by the voices of intolerance and extremism that can lead to violent conflict.
And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Sean todos muy bienvenidos a Vidas. Hay lugares donde el arte se unifica con el orgullo de los pueblos. Y esos lugares están llenos de colores, alegría, pasión, tradiciones, arraigo, valor y entrega.
Real Life, Fridays, only on Telesur. We share your feelings, exalt your accomplishments, and show your reality. Our approach is global and keeps us in tune with the peoples. Caribbean countries also get our signal. With enthusiasm, we will continue to broadcast for them. Because we are Telesur, the news broadcaster from South America and the Caribbean.
Welcome back to From the South. Indigenous organizations mobilized across Bolivia this Tuesday in defense of the Huipala, a flag that represents the indigenous communities of the plurinational state. The mobilizations came in the framework of the Indigenous Resistance Day and against right-wing attempts of destabilization.
Of this great march that we have planned for today at 9 a.m. with the conscience of the people, will see us hold a great demonstration in defense of our Huipala, which is the maximum representation of our peoples. It is a symbolic representation of the resistance of the Bolivian people. It is also a symbol of unity of the Bolivian people. That is why we have the will to continue defending it, and we are going to continue with our Huipala flying high, as it fully represents us, and we are going to continue defending it in the department of Chuquisaca.
Authorities in Mexico City have presented a new pre-Hispanic sculpture of a woman that will replace that of colonialist Christopher Columbus. The move comes as Mexico works to erase symbols that celebrate leading figures of the genocide of indigenous peoples. Well, this Tuesday is a national holiday in Spain, marking the anniversary of the so-called discovery of the Americas by Columbus in 1492. In Mexico, authorities talk about the Day of the Pluricultural Nation. It has been a year since the statue of the Genovese Admiral Columbus was removed from the plinth of the Mexico City square that bears his name. In its place, feminists have erected the figure of a woman with her clenched fist pointed upwards and requestioned the square, the place of women who fight. The mayor of the capital announced Tuesday that the statue will be replaced by an indigenous woman from the Olmec civilization, meant to represent 5 centuries of indigenous resistance.
Be the National Institute of Anthropology and History itself that will make a sustainable replica with the appropriate height, so that it will be La Joven de Amahac who represents the woman of our country in this place so emblematic for the city and for the country. It was discovered on January 1st, 2021 in the Huasteca of Veracruz, and it is La Joven de Amahac that everyone can see the original in the Museum of Anthropology that is being exhibited at this time, giving this special space to indigenous women as great symbolisms in the city.
The Venezuelan people mobilized this Tuesday in defense of the rights of indigenous peoples. In the streets of the capital, Caracas, citizens recalled that for more than 5 centuries, the peoples of Latin America have struggled against different empires and imperialism. Our correspondent, Andre Viera, brings us more on the mobilizations.
Neither a discovery nor an encounter. October the 12th is the day of indigenous resistance. The date recalls the arrival of the Spanish colonizers to our continent in 1492.
Our Abya Yala is our America. Our Abya Yala was invaded. It was a territory where the greatest genocide that we could have seen took place. It was not a conquest. It was not a meeting of 2 words. It was an invasion, and it was a genocide.
This is the Jona, an ancestral dance of the Wayu ethnic group, a culture that crosses generations and resists the different empires. Venezuela is a plural, diverse country and home to 44 indigenous different peoples, guardians of the planet and tireless defenders of humanity.
529 years after the violent arrival of the European Empire, in which there were the equivalent of 9 Holocaustos, 19 million indigenous people were exterminated in the name of the Holy Cross of the Bible. We have had a homeland here since the arrival of Commander Hugo Chavez 21 years ago. Today, on October 12, after 529 years of indigenous resistance, we continue to work for human rights.
A red tide marched through the streets of Caracas this Tuesday, feet firmly on the ground, warriors in defense of their dignity in the face of any attack.
Today, more than ever, we are fighting against an empire. 529 years against the Spanish Empire. Today it is against the US Empire, because this is a nation that has decided to be free, that has decided to defend its sovereignty, and indigenous people, because the indigenous people have the right to have a voice and to participate thanks to the Bolivarian Revolution.
The Day of the Indigenous Resistance was established in Venezuela by Commander Hugo Chavez in 2002 to replace the Day of the Race, steps that form part of a history that is built in the daily struggle.
We continue in the streets resisting, demonstrating to the workers' president, Nicolás Maduro, that we as indigenous people will continue in the streets. We will continue making an effort to support this revolutionary process, because only in these 21 years of revolution have we been vindicated for those 529 years.
More than 500 years after the arrival of the European colonizers in the Americas, the descendants of these invaders insist on maintaining other peoples submissive. But the sons and daughters of Huaycaipuro, Lautaro, Sepe Tiajuru, Camaileka Bastidas, and Bartolina Sisa resist and advance towards the construction of an egalitarian world within the diversity of our peoples.
André Vieira y Jesús Romero, Telesur, Caracas, Venezuela.
Thank you, Andre, for this information. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro Moros announced Tuesday that he will send a letter to King Felipe of Spain requesting an end to the celebrations of October 12th as a holiday that marks the start of the colonization of the Americas, stressing that the date represents the genocide suffered by indigenous peoples.
The Americas, that the King of Spain still celebrates October 12th, the day that began the colonialism of America and the greatest genocide in history, as a holiday, as a supposed day of civilization, and that every time Spain goes out to celebrate and dance on October 12th, it offends the historical memory of our grandparents and the historical heritage and values of our people.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The United Nations Top Court awarded Somalia control of most of a potentially oil and gas-rich chunk of the Indian Ocean on Tuesday after a bitter legal battle with neighboring Kenya over their sea border. The International Court of Justice ruled there was no agreed maritime boundary and drew a new border close to the one claimed by Somalia, although Kenya kept a part of the 100,000 square kilometer area, the Chief Judge Joan Donoghue said. Kenya, which had claimed the entire area of the East African coast, said last week that it would refuse to recognize the jurisdiction of the biased Hague-based court. The court's decision, which is final, could have far-reaching consequences for the future of relations between the two key countries in one of the world's most troubled regions. Somalia took Kenya to the ICJ in 2014 over the disputed patch of sea.
Result by a major shifting of the provisional equidistance line, changing its southeasterly direction to an exclusively easterly direction. The court considers that such a shifting of the provisional equidistance line, as argued for by Kenya, would result in a radical adjustment while clearly not achieving an equitable solution. It would severely curtail Somalia's entitlements to the continental shelf and exclusive economic zone generated by its coast adjacent to that of Kenya. The court is thus satisfied that the adjusted line that it has established as the maritime boundary for the exclusive economic zone and the continental shelves of Somalia and Kenya within 200 nautical miles in the Indian Ocean described earlier achieves an equitable solution.
In a televised speech following the ICJ's ruling, Somalian President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed called on Kenya to seize an opportunity to strengthen relations between the two countries.
International Court of Justice for supporting the rule of law. This verdict is a very good example that shows the transparency and openness of the ICJ. Kenya should instead see the decision of the court as an opportunity to strengthen the relationship of the two countries and the collaboration of their neighboring people. Somalia did not choose to be a neighbor with Kenya, but it was the willing of the Almighty God, so that we are forced to live as peaceful neighbors. Somalia was committed to that forever and welcomes it now.
And residents of the Somalian capital Mogadishu reacted to the news of the UN's top court ruling in favor of their country in the dispute with neighboring Kenya.
It is a big happy day for all Somali people after ICJ verdict on the Somalia-Kenya maritime dispute. This case was in court for the past 7 years. However, it's a historical victory for all of us. We should not celebrate because it is our territorial waters and we should possess it. Our territorial waters can be negotiated. We should die for it. We should also defend it with our money.
Now we address other topics. The chief executive of the Chinese Special Administrative Region of Hong Kong, Carrie Lam, has called on the public for help in raising the vaccination rate, as authorities seek to meet the 70% target that was set for the end of September. 63% of the population has received the first dose, according to the Hong Kong vaccination dashboard.
You asked what more we could do. I want you people to tell me what more we could do. Other than mandating. But even mandating may not give you the needed result. If people said that I have a medical condition, I have other problems, I just could not take a jab. So ultimately it requires the cooperation of everyone in society. Now if a person has taken a jab, what about this person's parents? What about his grandparents? What about his relatives and friends? Please help us to appeal to people around you that if we want to have normal travel with the mainland and normal travel with overseas, if we want to be able to go to elsewhere for tourism again, then please help us to raise the vaccination rate to a higher level.
And Cuba is testing the efficacy of the Soberana Plus COVID-19 vaccine in Italy, especially on recovering coronavirus patients over the age of 19, as reported by the president of the state-run pharmaceutical group BioCuba Pharma.
In Asia, there is also interest. For example, we have a scientific collaboration in Italy with a hospital in Italy where they are evaluating recovering patients who have been treated with 2 boosters of Soberana Plus. All the vaccines that we are going to manufacture during the rest of the year are contracted, and we have not wanted to close other agreements because we want to be very serious and we want to comply with the delivery schedules.
And we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telestudienglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please follow us and join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telestudy English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.